Instead of trying to change the white man in your mind, make you accept us, we change the mind of the black man and make him accept himself. And as soon as he accepts himself, he'll solve his own problem. He won't be trying to force himself into your factory and into your bedroom and into your kitchen.
With no education, you have neo-colonialism instead of colonialism, like you got in Africa 9, like you got in Haiti. So what we're talking about is there has to be an educational program. That's very important. As a matter of fact, it's so important for us that a person has to go through 6 weeks of our political education before he can consider himself a member of the party, able to even run down ideology for the party. Why? Because if they don't have an education, then they're nowhere. You dig what I'm saying? They're nowhere because they don't even know why they're doing what they're doing. You might get people caught up in the emotionalist movement. You understand me? You might get them caught up in because they're poor and they want something. And then if they're not educated, they want more. And before you know it, they'll be capitalists. And before you know it, we have Negro imperialists.
To give you an address from the political prisoners held captive in the dungeons of the United States. They do not want me to give you this address because they do not want our South African brothers to know that there are black political prisoners here in the United States. Brother, comrade Nelson Mandela, on behalf of my brothers in prison, on behalf of the Puerto Rican nationalistas, on behalf of the Native American political prisoners, and on behalf of the white American political prisoners, I say to you, brother, we love you and we will not give up the fight. 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 Amendment! Amendment!
I've seen Nelson Mandela walk out of prison, and I want to whisper in his ear that I knew down in the bottom of my soul how he must feel. He is a symbol of the triumph of the human spirit over tyranny. The human spirit is the essence of all just laws. And when the spirit and the heart is corrupt, then the laws and the implementation become corrupt. And the only way we can change the society and the laws that constrain us today and that oppress other people, only way we can change that is we have to take a position. We need to understand that when black people were brought here to the United States, they were brought here as an act of war. They were kidnapped here, and the destruction of the black family and the creation of a slave mentality was an integral part of the development of this nation state.
If there's going to be justice, there have to be funerals on both sides. That the United States has never withdrew from any conflict, from any situation of imperial domination, unless the people kick their ass out.
Peace and Black Power families, Brother IJ Taimba from Harlem Liberation School, where we teach black people to wake up, clean up, and stand up, in the words of Brother Malcolm X. We have a very special broadcast. We, of course, believe that all these broadcasts are special for different reasons. This broadcast is special because of the soldier, the warrior, the spokesman, the wordsmith, the community organizer and activist that will be dropping some jewels, some wisdom and insight on us today. And I want to give him a formal introduction. Dhoruba Bin Wahad was a leading member of the New York Black Panther Party, a field secretary of the Black Panther Party, responsible for organizing chapters throughout the East Coast, and he was a member of the famous Panther 21. Arrested in June 1971, he was framed as part of the illegal FBI counterintelligence program known as COINTELPRO and subjected to unfair treatment and torture during his 19 years in prison. During Dhoruba's incarceration, litigation on his behalf produced over 300,000 pages of COINTELPRO documentation, and upon release in 1990, he was able to bring a successful lawsuit against the New York Department of Corrections for their criminal activities. Living in both Ghana and the United States, Dhoruba continues to write and work promoting Pan-Africanism and uncompromising critique of imperialism and capitalism and freedom for all political prisoners. Family, I want to bring our good brother Baba Dhoruba on. Baba Dhoruba, how you be? You gotta unmute yourself.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Uh, I think I got an echo twice. I think I got you. I think
Think
I got you. Yeah, I do.
think
Uh,
you on here twice. I'm gonna okay. Try it now.
um, can you hear me now? No echo.
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. We good. First of all, I want to show my appreciation and thank you for having me on your program, and enabling me to hopefully reach your audience and who listen to your show, who watch your show, and who try to follow some of the broadcasts that you post. Um, I just want to begin by saying that you had a question for me previously before we started the program, and you asked me about what did I mean by the term democratic fascism, and um, and so I want to try to explain it as briefly as possible so we can move on during the program.
Yes,
Democratic
sir.
fascism is the term that I've employed over the past several years to define the political dispensation, the political uh, um, climate, and the political reality of the white supremacist construct that is the United States of America, that claims to be a democracy, that claims to be a democratic republic. First of all, the two terms, democracy and republic, don't necessarily go together, but I'm not going to go there. Many of us in the United States believe that we are living in a somewhat imperfect democracy, a flawed democracy, a democracy that is still um, um, constructing itself and restructuring itself after the cataclysmic civil war that resulted in the rise of Eastern finance capitalism over the agrarian chattel slave system, plantation system of the South. First of all, I want to say that both democracy, the term democracy and fascism, tend to be at odds with each other, at least when you look them up in the dictionary and when you try to um, um, uh, put them in a historical context of societies or industrial nations that have went on before us. We are under the delusion that we are living in a democracy. Rather, we are living in a plutocracy, a country that has been ruled by the rich, by the propertied classes, and has always been ruled by the rich. In fact, it's institutionalized in the electoral college system. The electoral college system was created by the landed gentry, the founders of the so-called United States as we know it, and it was designed to ensure that their property and the control of their property could not be usurped by the masses of people through an electoral system, through a one person, one vote system. So the electoral college system in itself is an artifice of the rich, of the property class. Having said that, we need to also understand that we could look anywhere in the West, we could see that democracy is not reflected in the same way as it is in the United States. There's parliamentary democracy in almost every Western state that claims to be democratic. And you have a system where if the losing party loses, or if the government cannot form a majority from the opposition, then they can't rule. And so, in most Western nations that claim to be democracies, you have a system where the ruling party or the winning party has to get a certain number of votes before it could form a government. And if it doesn't reach that percentage of votes, usually it's 51% or something like that, or more, or 47% or 45%. It has to reach out to other parties and other political dispensations in order to form a government. Not so in the United States. In the United States, the electoral college system means that the winner takes all. Whoever wins the electoral college system, a vote, is the ruler. It would ascend to the White House and national office. And at the same time that he or she does this, they could lose the popular vote. We see that with the election of the orange man, Donald Trump. We see that when he was elected, he won the electoral college a vote against the wicked witch of the West, Hillary Clinton, and lost the majority vote, the popular vote. So electoral college system in the United States has enshrined and institutionalized the control of the political system by those who have money and property. This has evolved through the years into what we now see as the corporate plutocracy that we are under now, where less than 4% of the population controls almost the entire economy, the wealth, almost 85% of the economy, of the wealth. And it controls the profits of the working class that we call surplus value. It controls the profit of the working classes in
You muted yourself.
you can hear me, right?
Yes, sir.
And so this is the type of democratic so-called system that we call democracy. And this democratic system, this so-called democracy, is dominated by two main parties, the Republican and the Democratic Party. Of course, they both have a history going all the way back to the revolution, to the Revolutionary War against England, against the succession of the 13 original colonies, the colonial British colonies from the British Crown. But I don't want to go into all of that. Basically, we have a Republican and Democratic Party. And if any of your listeners have heard or listened to Malcolm X, the ballot or the bullet, he breaks down that both of these parties, both of these capitalist parties, are the left and right wing of the same vulture. And he even compares them to a wolf and a fox, both from the canine family. One is slick and talks slick to you and whispers in your ear, got game, and convinces you that they're really on your side. While the other one is a wolf. They don't give a fuck about you. They will devour you. They will come out and do what they're going to do, and they really don't care what you think about it. Well, that still persists to this day. But the difference now is that because of the gains of the post-civil the post-civil war aspirations by African people, because of the gains that we've made for voting rights, because of breaking out of the agricultural feudal system of Jim Crow, of sharecropping, into the system of Jim Crow, and then legal segregation, And finally, by 1954, and the Voting Rights Act, and and the liberation of our people from so-called second-class citizenship, giving us the right to vote, for vote either one of the white supremacists of the United States. The United States is a country that evolved from it that evolved from a settler colonial project. The United States was a settler state. It was a European settler state. It wiped out the native people. It appropriated their land. It gave their land to Europeans and immigrants and migrants from Europe. It enslaved us to work this land at first for almost 300 years. And so we need to understand that the United States is, in its present itinerary, in its present state, is and was a white supremacist construct. It's a European settler state, which I'll come back to later when we talk about the United States backing Israel in its genocidal war and its genocidal campaign against the Palestinian people.
But Dhoruba, let me interrupt you very quickly, and I'd like you to respond to uh, the people that say the reason that our people are behind, so to speak, oppressed, is because we haven't organized enough voting. We haven't pooled our resources in terms of money. Uh, some people say we don't have enough black elected officials, although certainly we have a whole lot more than ever in history. How do you respond to those sort of people that come with those arguments from our community?
Well, if you were listening to what I just said, you would see that Black people have never had any type of leverage politically or economically to behave and act in a sovereign fashion. We don't even think as a sovereign people. Okay. So, I mean, I just explained that. And I was coming to try to explain to you that the electoral college system was never created for to empower the working class, the working people, the people that would later become the basis for industrialization and industrial development of the United States. So it was never about that, you see. So what I want to say is that if we study our radical traditions and our radical history, if we study the struggles of African people um, um, during the so-called civil rights movement, during the after World War II, we would see that in essence, our struggle wasn't just merely to be able to vote. We never really struggled just to have a right to go to the polls and vote for nobody. What we struggled for was the ability or the capacity that we thought would enable us to determine our own destiny, to be able to empower our own communities, to address our own issues, and that the ballot supposedly gave us that opportunity. Of course, we see now in history, like I said, if we study our radical history, our traditions, we see now that, like Martin Luther King said, he feared that he was integrating Black people into a burning house, into a self-destruction paradigm of white supremacy and power. So we need to understand that we didn't just struggle for the right to vote, just to go into the polls and vote for Ho or vote for Hum or vote for a liar of a Democrat or a white supremacist racist from the right. That was never our objective. That was never the reason why we struggled to vote. We struggled for the vote in order to determine our own destiny, in order to take our communities and develop our own communities, to have equal opportunities to the institutions and of so-called democratic America of the United States. So the issue of voting or not voting was merely a means of organization, a tool of organization, using the institutional setup of the electoral system to empower ourselves. Of course, we have learned over the past um, uh, uh, several decades, that voting does not, in fact, empower us. And I explain why. Initially, because voting was never meant to empower the working people and the masses of people. It was meant to control their use of the and access to the um, the um, the fruits of society, the product of their labor. Capitalism is what determines our economic position. Capitalism is what makes us a permanent underclass. Capitalism is what evolved out of the agrarian chattel slave states of the South, and and their loss of the war to the Northeast and to the finance capital and the industrialists. So we need to understand that voting in itself is meaningless if we don't have the ability to act as a sovereign people, if we don't have the ability to determine the outcomes of our votes in our own community. So, having said that, when we look at how we did secure the vote, when we did secure the vote, when we began to integrate so-called institutions and different aspects of government, we see now that today we have more Black faces in high places than we've ever had in our history. We have Black mayors, we have Black police chiefs, we have Black prosecutors, we have all of these Black folks in political power, and we still don't have no power. The police still murder us with impunity. We still are subjected to discrimination and second-class citizenship when it comes to opportunities for jobs, when it comes to how we deal with our economic situation. You know, I think that we fail to understand that just because we are consumers in a capitalist a society, that doesn't translate into political power. That the economy, the fact that we could spend money to buy things don't make us politically powerful. Okay. So we need to disavow ourselves of this notion that, you know, if we conserved our dollars and we put our dollars in a Black bank, you know, we would somehow empower ourselves and pass on what's bullshit. Because no matter what bank you use, no matter what system of finance capital you use, you are still subject to the overarching finance capital of the capitalist state, of the major banks. If you notice that when the economy collapsed, when Mama Lama Obama came into power, you know, and fixed it, he said that these institutions, these banking institutions, these insurance companies were too big to fail. Okay, so they printed money to bail them out. They put the burden on bailing them out on the taxpayers, on the working people. And what have we gotten since then? Inflation and unemployment is cyclical in the capitalist system. Okay, because the capitalist system is based on exploitation of poor working people and marginalization of those people that it cannot employ. The pushback against the civil rights gains of the 60s, the empowerment that we supposed to have gotten in the 60s because of the civil rights movement, the pushback against that was mass incarceration. The surplus workers that had began to accumulate after slavery, when our labor became surplus labor, when our labor became something that was of less value to the capitalist class, you know, we were banned from unions. We had to take the lowest paying jobs. We moved into urban areas from the South that became increasingly disenfranchised. I mean, all we have to do is read our history. You know, that's what we need to do. We need to read. We need to study and understand that capitalism has never been to the benefit of African people in the United States. And it was during the period of the 60s when we were burning cities down, when we was tearing shit up, that LBJ and the ruling elite, political elite, came up with the idea and the notion of Black capitalism, came up with the notion of what they call this stuff is so routine. I keep forgetting it. That we came up with the notion of the Black of black capitalism and our investment in the future. Okay. He said, well, if we burning down cities, we had to invest in it. We had to feel like we had an investment in it. Okay. So that's how the poverty pimps came out. The poverty pimps came out with the programs to cool down the cities and buy, buy black and all of this stuff. And we began to elect those who were seemingly wealthy, who were seemingly successful. We elected them to political office, and we got what we have today, the black misleadership class in the Congressional Black Caucus. And most of them were anti-poverty pimps to begin with. Most of them were opportunists that were used by white capital, that was used by the system to maintain control and hegemony over African people. So we need to understand that we have been institutionalized as a permanent underclass. And that's because of our status in the United States as a domestic colony. I could go on and on about this, but I really want to just talk about why I use the term democratic fascism, because the second part of this is I explain the bogus notion of the word democracy. Well, the second part of this is fascism. And what is fascism? Fascism is the marriage of finance, capital, and the state. Fascism is the rule of authoritarian political systems governed by the wealthy in society. So fascism is nothing new, but in the United States, in this particular century and over the last several years, it has taken on a new form. And the new form that it has taken on was this bogus delusion of democracy. And right now, if your listeners go to the Heritage Foundation Project 2025, they would see how this fascism is to be institutionalized going forward after this election year. How we are going to be put into a permanent situation where we have no political power, that we are isolated politically, that we have no financial leverage, that our only ability or capacity is to consume, is to buy material things, most of which we don't need, most of which we don't manufacture, most of which we don't have any control over. So we are consumers in a capitalist society where consumption is considered the major objective and purpose of our existence. We go to work. We don't own the housing and the real estate. We pay rent. The majority of African people and indeed working people pay rent. They don't own their own house. And if they did own their own house, they have to pay a mortgage, and the mortgage is taken out by a bank, and the bank can reclaim the house the minute that you default on your mortgage. So you don't even really own the home that you're paying to live in. So we need to understand what this really means. What this really means is that the collective wealth of working people is siphoned off by those who control the means of production and control the corporations in America. It's not controlled by working people. It's not controlled by the poor. So we are wage slaves. We went from being chattel slaves to wage slaves. And more so because of white supremacy, we have been herded into urban enclaves and herded into communities where we don't have access to affordable housing, where we don't have access to decent food and living conditions, where we are forced to pay our bills to absentee landlords. So we are not only wage slaves, we are a colonized people, a domestic colony. So I'm sorry, but I'm not hearing you.
I have to interrupt you very quickly. I apologize. Before we go further, I want to thank everybody that's here, watching live, for being here. I want to thank in advance the many of you that are going to watch the later recorded version. But I do want to make sure I say this right now. And that is, Baba, we were talking the other day. I don't know if you all know, you're 79 years old. Is that correct, Baba?
Yes, sir.
Yes. So we're not talking to a spring chicken here. This brother has been involved in this, I'm gonna say, for 5 decades, Dhoruba.
Something like that.
Yeah. So we want one of the reasons that I wanted to have Brother Dhoruba on is just because of the wealth of information and knowledge. And so those of you who aren't familiar can see what a revolutionary looks like, walks like, talks like, right? But also because Baba Dhoruba is in a situation where I think he needs the community. He's been sticking his neck out for us for 5 decades. And right now, he needs the community to stick their necks out for him, which we sometimes are not as good at. Um, Baba Dhoruba, I know that you have some medical challenges. I know that you have some transportation issues. You need to get back to Ghana. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Uh,
and is that where you're getting
I
your
just want
medical
to say,
treatment?
yeah, I just want to say some of my late comrades, friends and supporters who loved him, Sekou Odinga, who passed away
Mm.
actually the day that I came back on the 12th of last month, have come up with enough funds to get me back to Ghana to get my plane ticket back. But because of my medical condition, it's a form of neuropathy. I have problems. I've had problems since the second of last month with this severe muscle, um, um, you know, dysfunction, and um, and so it was diagnosed as some spinal disc problems. But I have to do physical therapy in order to fully recover, and I have to do this physical therapy in Africa, so that means I have to pay for it out of pocket, and so my Medicare and Medicaid won't cover it. But I have to do this physical therapy over the next several months. And so I was trying to get comrades and friends to somehow um, help me overcome that financial hurdle. And I want to say on your program now, um, Black Power Media has put out a lot for me, and many people, and my love goes to everyone that responded. Many people responded and helped me through this period. And I just want to say, if I can't say it then on that platform, I want to say now, if everybody's just listening, I really appreciated the response from folks, and and it's been very, very helpful. But like I said, I don't get um, I don't get regular Social Security and Social Security benefits. I only get Social Security insurance, you know, and so every month. So it's not enough for me to pay for my upkeep. It's definitely not enough for me to maintain myself in Africa, although maintaining myself in Africa is far cheaper than if I was to try to live here in New York. So um, I just wanted to say to all of those who have contributed and helped me that I'm extremely grateful, and I hope to still be able to maintain myself and represent the best revolutionary politics that I can, best Pan-African character that I can for our people and for our future and for their children.
We thank you for that, Baba Dhoruba. Those watching, we have scrolling as a ticker on the bottom of your screen 2 ways that if you're so inclined, you can send donations to Baba Dhoruba via Cash App. We have his Cash App handle, which is simply the dollar sign and his first name, Dhoruba. Or via PayPal, you would send to his email, which is dhoruba@gmail.com. You can't really forget that. But also, I want you to know that we want to have a kind of an ongoing way to generate income for Baba Dhoruba that doesn't necessarily stop and that may solicit larger donations. So probably in the next 2 days or so, we're going to put up a GoFundMe so that you can also give to that, and that can be an ongoing sort of thing. And I hope that no one is looking at this as, oh, these black nationalists always asking. Listen, family, you have to fund the revolution. You got to support people that are sticking their necks out for us. It's just common sense, and we really shouldn't even have to explain that. But I'm hoping that those watching live, if you got something you can donate to Baba, please do so in one of those 2 ways, Cash App or PayPal. And those who will see this in the later recorded version, we're going to have in addition to these 2 ways, we'll have a GoFundMe up as well. I just wanted to make sure we got that out so that those watching live can begin putting some of the money back to people that have enriched our lives, whether we know it or not, have made our lives a little bit easier, whether we appreciate that or not. Bob Dhoruba, that's going to scroll on the bottom as we continue. And I know you were talking about
Could I just add to that?
Yes, sir.
I want folks to understand that the money that a lot of folks contributed, for my health and stuff, more than half of it, I basically, I don't want to say gave away. I used it to help people who have been helping me, and who have went out of their way to be with me when no one was with me, who have been able to, do the work that I couldn't do. And so it's not something where I just accumulate the money and I just, feel like, it's all mine and I could do whatever I want. No, there's folks that love me and that cared for me, and they have done so without any money, without any compensation. And so I try to look out for them as well. So I just want you to know that when you do contribute, whether it's to my physical therapy or whatever, it's going to help those who are involved in the physical therapy, who are activists, some of them who are committed to our struggle, to empower them, to allow them to do the therapy. So it's not just something that when you contribute to me, it's all about me. And so it's about the network. And this is how I've always felt. I've never felt that I should hoard comrades and sisters' talents just for my own aggrandizement. I'd like to put brothers and sisters together who are brilliant, who are dedicated, so that they can go on and create brilliant things and do good things. And I feel that when I'm able to do that, I've contributed. So I just wanted to say that when you talk about when we do talk about this GoFundMe, it's not just for me. You see, it's not just going into my back pocket or into my bank account. There are families and people who have families that relied on me, that rely on me, that have sacrificed for me when I had nobody to do anything. And so I feel dedicated to them. I feel that whatever I get belongs to them too. Yeah, I'm not physically up to where I used to be, so I have to deal with that. But you know, that doesn't stop. That doesn't stop the show. That doesn't stop the program. That doesn't stop the commitment. And so I just want people to know that when they donate anything to my health or to trying to help me, it's to help me help other people while they're helping me at the same time. It's the real spirit of true socialism that we're talking about here.
Yes, sir. And once again, Baba Dhoruba never fails. If you want to know, get a sense of what revolutionary looks like, how they get down, how they think, their cosmology, you're getting it right here, live from one of our many sources. So please, family, again, to the degree that you can, please try to support our good brother, even if it means that you're going to share this video and that you're going to share his Cash App and his PayPal. There's so many ways you can help. If you can't give, then share that information so others can. And brother Dhoruba, my queen ain't gonna let you forget that that she has put on the table some fried fish for you, my brother. She said you haven't claimed it yet. She's starting to take it personal.
Well, well, trust me. I'm all in. When you called me that I was eating some West Indian food, I was
Yes,
slamming.
sir.
I know the vegans are gonna cringe, but I was slamming some oxtail, and I got some ackee and saltfish on hold, for later tonight. So don't think I want to pass up that fish that Sister Love has made for me. I just haven't been able to hobble on over there and get it yet.
That's right. And we've been going through our own crazy medical issues as well. But we're going to get it to you one way. She's talking about if you eat this fish, you're gonna feel better. So I think she's arguing that her fish has medicinal properties. Good brother.
Well, the medicinal property is the love. That's what it
That's
is.
right.
You know,
That's right.
that's
And her
the
fish is
medicinal
delicious.
that's the medicinal property. But getting back to,
Now, sister,
I'm
I'm
sorry,
sorry,
I was going to say,
Sister Veronica. I think she's in the Carolinas. Am I right, Sister Veronica Ankrum? Um, she said that she's saying hello to the Queen Brenda, and she also contributed to you, Brother Dhoruba. We want to thank you for that, and please, everybody watching, whether you donate right now or not, please make a commitment to donate either monetarily or through sharing his Cash App, sharing the video, sharing his PayPal, so that we can get the whole community or a larger segment of the community involved uh, with that particular effort. Now, Baba Dhoruba, you were talking when we talked, I think yesterday. Yesterday, you were also talking about this issue of right-wing nationalism. Now, many black nationalists think that nationalism is always a good thing. Oh, nationalism, that's a good thing. But we know that political ideologies can sometimes be perverted and are not always good things. So when we say right-wing nationalism, could you help us understand what you mean by that?
well, a prime example of the right wing nationalism that we're talking about is the jingoism of Americanism, the exceptionalism of so-called American, the United States as an exceptional democracy, as this beacon on the hill to humanity, when the United States has been the foremost purveyor of war and exploitation and murder in the 20th century and the 21st century. If we want to see a very perfect example of reactionary right-wing nationalism, all we have to do is look at the European settled state of Israel. Zionism is a reactionary, racist form of nationalism. It's an anti Semitic form of nationalism because it's Europeans expropriating the lands and establishing their power and hegemony on the lands of legitimate Semites, the Palestinians. The current rulers of the European settler state of Israel are not Semites. They're Europeans. Came from Europe. The whole proposition of setting up the state of Israel was to get the so-called Ashkenazi Jews and out of Europe, who were being subjected, the Jews in Europe were being subjected to regular pogroms, persecutions, and genocide all of the time that they were in Europe. And the solution that the British Empire came to with the Balfour Agreement was to grant them a homeland in Palestine in order for them to leave Europe and do to Europe what the Nazis and the fascists did to them in Europe. And that's what we're witnessing right now. So when we talk about nationalism, there is such a thing as reactionary right-wing nationalism. And this is usually the jingoistic nationalism that's the product of the corporate state, of the ruling elite, of racists, of the European settler mentality. The United States, Australia, Canada were all European settler states, and they all were genocidal in their approach to the native people. They all were reactionary nationalist projects and spin-offs from the British Empire. So there is such a thing as reactionary nationalism. Now, what we're talking about when we talk about our right to self-determination and our right to a nation and our right to be able to determine our own destiny, we're not talking about reactionary white supremacy or black supremacy. What we're talking about is the right of every people, as enshrined in the United Nations founding documents, the right of every people to have the ability to determine their own destiny, to be able to live in peace, to be able to organize themselves for their own benefit, and to determine their own destiny without the interference of hostile forces and other nations that are seeking to dominate them. We have never had this ability to determine our own destiny. So when Malcolm X talks about black nationalism, when we talk about the Black Panther Party's program, and we talk about our communities should have the right to determine our own destiny. We're talking about the rights of every sovereign people, of every people, to be able to determine their own destiny and live and live out their lives based on their own interests and their own culture and their own values. So the difference, though, between right-wing nationalism is that it tends to be colonialist. It tends to be dominating. It tends to be racist and exclusive. So when they talk about um, uh, the jingoistic nationalism of the United States, when we look at the founding fathers of the United States, as I went into earlier, about the electoral system and how they constructed it. They constructed it so that ordinary working peasants, ordinary working people would never in their numbers be able to vote and take the property of the elite and the property owners of American society. So they enshrined their wealth, they protected their wealth with this electoral college system. Okay. So when we talk about American nationalism, which if you look in the dictionary is called reactionary nationalism, is usually authoritarian and jingoistic. The Nazi German state, the fascist state of Nazi Germany, was a right-wing nationalist state.
Mm.
It 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 slaughtered 6 million Ashkenazi Jews. It slaughtered over 1 million Roma people. It killed thousands and thousands of Slavic people in order to assert the right of what they considered the ideal human being, the white European Aryan German. So this is what right-wing nationalism is. We could use a simple mathematical equation. We could say that racism plus nationalism equals genocide or equals what we would call um, um, genocide. Because all right-wing nationalist states are ethnocentric in their values and in their establishment. If we go read the Heritage Foundation's Project 2025, it's about establishing an ethnocentric Christian white state. When we look at
Mm-hmm.
the major contradiction in the political arena today, what is it? Migration and immigration across the southern borders by people who are not like, quote, us. Hmm? And if we
That's
look at
right.
the history of the southern borders, we would see that Texas and New Mexico and California were once Mexico's. They belonged to Mexico. They belonged to Spain and Mexico. The United States took these states and these territories all the way to the Rio Grande by force. By force. This is one of the reasons why you don't have a migration problem in Canada. You don't see them talking about the Canadian border needs to be shut down and closed because illegal immigrants are flowing across the border. Okay. And when we have ignorant black folks who look at migrants coming to the US as some people that's going to replace us fighting for the crumbs of the capitalist system, we are engaging in ignorance. We are buying into the ignorance mindset of the European settlers because no one puts a baby on their back and travels through jungles and swamps, mosquito infested swamps, through guerrilla territories, thousands of miles to reach the Rio Grande to come to a country where they think they can get a better life. Why? Because the United States, in its Monroe Doctrine, has taken their countries and completely destroyed their countries, completely exploited their countries. This is what the United States did in Guatemala. This is what the United States did in Bolivia. This is what the United States done across Central America and in Haiti. The United States occupied Haiti at least 4 or 5 times. So the economies of these countries are devastated because of U.S. imperialism, because of U.S. A corporate greed that made living in those states impossible for ordinary human beings. So they packed their children and came to the place that destabilized their country because they believed that they thought that they would have an opportunity to make a life for themselves. And what do? We say stupid shit like, oh, these migrants don't belong here. You understand? They're not American. They speak in Spanish. We play the role of white supremacist advocates of exclusion of people who are the victims of U.S. imperialism and U.S. white supremacy. So we need to
Sounds like for those, I'm sorry, Bob, it sounds like for those listening, there's an implied we need to fight alongside our brown brothers and sisters as opposed to maybe seeing them as, you know, nuisances, that we need to see them as political allies. Would you agree with that?
absolutely, but we see them as competitors for the crumbs of capitalism. You see, we look at them as they're going to take jobs from us. Okay, every migrant and immigrant community that came into America since the Statue of Liberty was put up came into America when they had the potato famine in Ireland. They came into America. They stayed in the ghettos for a few, the urban ghettos for a few, for a generation or two, and then they moved on up. What did they have in common? They were Europeans. When the Europe, in fact, when Italians first started came to America, they weren't even considered by white Anglo-Saxon Protestants as being white, as being European enough. It's the same situation with many Slavic people who came from Eastern Europe. So we need to understand the only ingredient in the great melting pot of America that didn't melt down was black people.
Mm.
And we didn't come here voluntarily. We didn't come here as a result of the potato famine. We were brought here as an act of war. We were kidnapped and taken to this country as an act of war. And that war has continued to this day. Because politics is the continuation of war by nonviolent means, whereas war is the continuation of politics by violent means. We were violently brought here as an act of war, and we have been maintained in a position of second-class citizenship, underclass, as a political act of war. That's why we've had to fight over and over again for basic rights, for the right to vote, for the right to go to school, for the right to do this and the right to do that. And we won all of those struggles. So what are we fighting for now if we're still fighting for the right to vote? We already won that struggle. Why are we revisiting it? We are revisiting it because black people in this generation does not read, does not understand our radical history and legacy. Otherwise, they wouldn't reinvent failure. And that's what we're doing. We're reinventing failure. We're talking about defunding the police. You're not going to have any police state on the face of the earth that's going to defund disarmed agents. That's not something that they're going to do. We should have been talking about mobilizing the vote, which I said was a means to organize people. It wasn't an end in itself. We should have organized the vote in the urban areas where we are the majority to take control of the police, to take control of public safety, to create public safety policing zones where we are the ones that hire and fire the police, where we are the ones that determine how the police behave in our communities. Instead, what do? We talk about defunding the police, and them crackers say, we ain't done defunding the police. In fact, what we're going to do is we're going to build cop cities so that they could be more efficient in containing your monkey ass. So we need to understand that we are living, and this is what I was talking about fascism, we're living in a democratic fascist state in which finance, capital, and the state are bond together, and their sole purpose is to control and terrorize people, working people, and people of color. This is why we have a useless comprador class. If we believe that putting black faces in high places is going to change our condition, we should have been disavowed of this a long time ago. Okay? We need to
be
build
free by now, if that was the case.
But why do we keep talking about the alternatives between ho and hum, between the so-called lesser of two evils? The lesser of two evils is still evil. So we need to have our own political party. We need to have our own working class political party. We need to read the radical readings, the radical organizational practices of Fred Hampton and the original Rainbow Coalition that Jesse Jackson co-opted with Martin Luther King's bloody T-shirt on, that he co-opted. The original Rainbow Coalition brought together white working class people, Latinos who worked in the fields. It brought together Chicanos who were migrant workers. It brought together black urban people to form a political rainbow coalition where we could exercise power independent of the right of the Democratic or Republican Party. And we need to understand that we don't think as a sovereign people. That's why we keep going back to the same Democratic and Republican Party as if these two institutions are going to represent our interests or part of our interests. All we got to do is withhold our vote from one and give it to another. Nah, we need to hold these Negroes that's supposed to be wealthy and that have pimped black culture in order to become wealthy, that they should contribute to an independent political party. That there should be a third paradigm of political party. But we don't think as a sovereign people. We think as an underclass. We think as born-again slaves. We think as Negroes. That's why we have the Congressional Black Caucus of Black Negro misleadership.
Now, it sounds to me, Baba Dhoruba, that you have stayed over the decades closely aligned to the core sentiments and ideology of the Black Panther Party.
Absolutely.
What initiatives, what thinking, what elements of the Black Panther Party do you think we need to be applying right now?
Well, first thing I think we need to be applying right now, given the rise of white supremacy and white extremism and fascism, is that we need to be able to arm ourselves before we harm ourselves. We need to be able to organize our ability to control our communities from outside violent terrorism and the terrorism of these pigs and cowards in blue costumes. That's what we need to do. That's where community control of public safety using the referendum and using the ballot box comes in. We have to control the instruments of repression and terror that we immediately deal with every day, which is the police. That's one of the first things we have to do. We have to make the police accountable to our community. And how do we go about doing that? We go about organizing our communities to understand the role of law enforcement in a white supremacist construct, which is the United States of America. The police exist in our community to do two things: serve and protect. Serve those with money and wealth and protect their property. They are not in our community for our interests. They are not in our community to fight so-called criminal behavior and crime. Now, if we understand that very basic notion that we as a sovereign people have a right to self-defense, then a lot follows from that. And the enemy understands this. This is why you see now there's an assault on the so-called Second Amendment by the Supreme Court and others that prohibit those who own weapons from organizing or training together in any form or fashion. So we are behind the 8 ball. We have young people running around in the streets right now, armed to the teeth, and all they're doing is shooting and killing each other. You know, they're trying to become famous. They're rappers and knuckleheads running around, shooting and killing each other, jeopardizing ordinary innocent people in the community. And the first thing that we're going to holler for is more police and a war on crime. Who supported the so-called Omnibus Crime Act? It was Black elected officials. Who supported the war on crime? It was Black elected officials. And what came out of that was a militarized police, a police force that is militarized and focused on terrorizing and intimidating the Black community. So now what do we do about it? How do we undo that? You can't undo it. It's been done. All we can do is begin to protect and defend ourselves against it. So organizing, using the vote, is just the means to organize our people into institutions and into formations that will protect us from the white supremacist racist dogs who look down at us and who would oppress us and who would kill us. And so when you say that I haven't strayed that far from the Black Panther Party's original program, you're absolutely right. Point number 7 said that we want to control the police in our community, that they occupy our community like a foreign army, and that they institute so-called policies that they say are fighting crime in a way in our community that criminalizes our entire community, that criminalizes our children, that criminalizes our mothers and fathers. And they use that as a justification to brutalize and murder us. And as long as we as a people are not organized in order to able to exert a consequence on these crackers when they murder us, then we're at their mercy. And if we don't learn anything about imperialism, if we don't learn anything about white folks and Europeans, we do know from Vietnam to Korea. We do know that when you put your foot in their ass and they start coming home in body bags is when they start talking about peace and when they start talking about treaties. Until that point, your ass is grass, and they don't care nothing about us, and they don't care nothing about our lives or our humanity. And this is manifested in how the U.S. supports genocide against the Palestinian people. If the U.S. can get away with this with the Palestinian people, who are thousands of miles away in their own land, if they can get away with that, then we have to look at our black elected officials who are under the payroll of AIPAC, who are being paid by the Jewish Defense League and all of these different organizations, and that support police repression and police murder of African people. Why are we still talking about a police reform bill? Why is it still on the table? Because the police cannot be reformed. The police have to be controlled. They're armed agents of the state, and we have to take control of those state apparatuses in our community that can control the police. And that means we have to have our own political party. We have to have our own ability to think as a sovereign people and act in our own behalf.
Now, for those of you watching and listening to the fiery, insightful, precise words of Baba Dhoruba, you may or may not know that he's also, amongst many other things, a co-founder of the Black Liberation Army. So what he's saying, the Black Panther Party, some members of the Black Panther Party, I understand some other Black Power organizations as well were part of it. They actually operationalized this. They actually did something about what they saw was the racist cops. Could you, those things you feel comfortable sharing, Brother Dhoruba, could you tell us about the Black Liberation Army and its role in our
Well,
community and in, yes.
well, I'm in the process now of trying to write about that. It's a book called A Soldier's Story, and it's about Black armed resistance to racist police terrorism in the United States. So I'm in the process of writing this book right now. It's been difficult because, like I said, I got health issues and financial issues. But anyway, let me just say this, that like I said, people have to read. It's right there in the counterintelligence files. We have over 300,000 pages of COINTELPRO files that I've gotten in my lawsuit against the U.S. government. Those files are presently in Princeton University. But what you can discern from those files and what you can discern from what I'm trying to say to you is that the BLA, the Black Liberation Army, much like Hamas, was not necessarily a something that could be destroyed or repressed. It was an idea. It was ideal that we had the right to self-defense, that we had a right to control our own community. And those who terrorized us, who murdered our children, who murdered us, they had to face a consequence. Okay? So our motto was don't get mad, get even. Okay? And when the BLA started in 1971, the first cadres of the BLA, the police weren't running around the streets like they are now. They're not running around the streets beating up people and stomping them out while we photographed them. They wasn't doing that. Okay, they knew that if they abused our mothers, if they beat our children, if they killed us, that when the sun set, like Malcolm X said, it was even Steven. They understood that there was a consequence for their actions. Okay, the police unions have been used and certified in order to shield the police from indemnity, to shield the police from responsibility when they act brutally, when they violate our rights, when they violate our human rights and they murder us. Okay. But we learned from the armed struggles of other people who ran these crackers out their country. We learned from the struggles in Guinea-Bissau. We learned from the struggles against colonialism. We learned from the struggles of the Vietnamese people. The people that resist this type of oppression and terror will ultimately free themselves. And because we lack the ability or the capacity, or maybe we're just afraid to organize ourselves in a way that the police will think twice before they came in our community and abused us. And believe me, when the BLA was up and ripping and running, the police didn't only think twice. They thought 3 and 4 times. They didn't come in the community single, beating up nobody, kneeling on their neck and killing them while we videotaped that. Seriously? Okay, we didn't have videotapes then. But back then, somebody would at least throw a rock at that cop and he would have jumped off that neck for at least 5 minutes and that brother would be alive today, perhaps. But nobody even throws a brick. We just film it. Right. That means the spirit of the Black Liberation Army is not alive and well in this generation. The only thing that black children do today, they don't have no problem shooting each other and killing each other at the filling station and murdering innocent people. But when the cops come along, they throw their gun under the car and they throw their hands up and they make like they ain't do nothing. And then they sit up in court with the tattoos all over their face with a shirt and tie on, trying to look like, we was just chilling. You see?
Have you noticed, Baba Dhoruba, as I have, many of us have, that today we do have a number of, let's say, black militias, black military formations that are in principle committed to protecting black community, but they don't seem, unlike the Black Liberation Army, they don't seem to be as engaged in the streets, as point of contact, protecting black people, standing up for black people. They're more involved with marches and things of that nature. Have you noticed that? And if so, why do you think that is?
Well, you've had technology come along and create what we call a global village. We have instant communications at our disposal. In the old days and back in the 60s, we had to organize people face to face. We had to go into the community and talk to the sisters and brothers, talk to the brothers in the pool hall and in the barber shop. What a lot of people don't understand, and it's going to come out in my book, In the Soldier's Story, that there were people in the black community that supported the BLA. Now, if you stuck a mic in their face from NBC and say, and NBC said, what do you think about these black terrorists who are killing cops? They might say, well, it's a shame, we don't think that that's cool. Okay. But they the same ones that would give us the keys to their apartment while they go somewhere on the weekend. Okay. They the same ones that supported the Black Underground. We had an underground railroad when we were slaves. We had Harriet Tubman when we were slaves. So don't act like this idea and this concept in building the type of underground network that's necessary to exert a consequence on our enemies is something that we can't do. We don't do it because we've been programmed to believe that we can't win. We've been programmed to believe that we're powerless. We have pork chop preachers that's telling us up there that we should turn in our guns and get some money. And while when we look at the right wing in America, they're armed to the teeth. To the teeth. You see, they're not running around in their community, shooting each other up at filling stations. True, you have mass murderers, and most of those mass murderers have been what I would call emotionally and psychologically disturbed white boys and girls. You see, but what makes us think that our liberation will start from fear? What makes us think that we haven't been driven crazy by white supremacy? What makes us think that our community is not traumatized by 5 and 6 generations of white supremacy and subjugation? We are just as crazy as everybody else. And this is why we had a slogan in the Black Liberation Army that we used to use every time we went out on an operation. It said, blood to the horse's brow and woe to those who cannot swim. Blood to the horse's brow and woe to those who cannot swim. So when we took to the streets, we took to the streets to hunt our enemies. We didn't take to the streets to hunt black folks. We didn't take to the streets to take a corner so that we could sling some yayo and dope and call it our corner. We wasn't talking about that we were the baddest gang on the streets. In fact, the dope dealers and the drug dealers had to work with the police so that they could do business. The police was using them to find out if they could inform on us in our network. And the police said, well, look, we're going to shut you down. We're going to shut you down, Big Willie, if you don't give us one of these BLA soldiers. if you don't tell us where they stashed it is at. So we need to understand that a black person that's on the street that's doing that's engaging in what we call illegitimate capitalism, hustling or whatever with a gun is a criminal. Is someone who has no politics, but one who's on the streets organizing our people to defend themselves, to protect ourselves, is a revolutionary. So these formations that we have that's marching around, some of them, you know, they're all black suited and they claim to be heirs to the Black Panther Party. That's all good. The symbolism is okay, but the symbolism without substance is meaningless. An enemy knows this. They know this. And if you go back to how they segue from COINTELPRO to Operation New Kill and how J. Edgar Hoover and the president's personal advisor and Nixon, they all met in the White House when the BLA first came into prominence. And the president said, look, we got an urban guerrilla potential on our hands here. We got white kids in the weather underground blowing up recruiting stations. We got Latinos from the FALN, Puerto Rican Liberation Struggle, blowing up government buildings. And we got these black folks running around in the streets, you know, talking about they're the Black Liberation Army. What are we going to do? So they initiated Operation New Kill, which meant new killing of police officers. That's what took over from COINTELPRO. And that's how the police began this militarization. It began this militarization in 1970 and 1971. And today is the result of what we have. And today is the reason why you have cop cities that have sprung up all over the country and that are financed by certain companies and corporations that finance unions. And the training of these cops go hand in hand with U.S. foreign policy. The IDF, the Israeli Defense Force, trains with U.S. policemen, trains with cops from Germany. Okay, they use common tactics and common techniques in order to deal with what they consider the threat to national security. And the foremost threat to national security in America is the black population.
Robert Dhoruba, we are unfortunately coming to a close of this program. And I wanted to know, were there any things on your heart or mind to say that my questions or this time has not allowed you to express? Is there anything you want to make sure you get out before we close?
Well, one thing I wanted to say is something that I said to the FTP the other night, that those of us who are serious organizers in the community, for whatever level, whether we're organizing as community activists trying to intervene in violence, you know, a fratricidal violence or family violence, whether we're trying to help homeless people, that we need to build up a survival training program where we go into the churches and we ask our faith-based activists and community members. We ask them a simple question: what would we do in this community if the lights went off tomorrow and didn't come back on? What would we do if a natural or a man-made catastrophe cut the water off in our community and we didn't have water to drink? What would we do? And you'll see everybody will be silent. So we have to prepare for that eventuality. That means that we have to begin to utilize those brothers and sisters who have skills and who are in our community every day, servicing our community. Whenever we talk about we have a problem with our internet or the TV, we call up, we call Verizon or whatever, and who comes in the utility truck? A black man or a black woman comes to fix our TV and set up the system. When there's a problem with the sewage or there's a problem with a busted water main, who in the community is fixing it? Usually it's black folks who are the experts in fixing it, who's digging up the sidewalks and doing the work. We need to enlist these skilled workers that we know have been the lifeblood of survival in our community. The COVID lockdown showed us that these ordinary people, these people who service the emergency services in the hospital, who look out for us in terms of keeping the water running, who looks out for us in terms of keeping the electricity on, all of these people have skills that they should share with their community so that we could build the type of infrastructure in our community so that if the lights go off, we could turn them back on, that the churches could begin to donate money to build large generators that are powered by by sun and wind. We need to build these types of infrastructures in our community from the ground up, so that if the lights go off, our grandmother could get from the top floor in the projects down to the ground floor, and she can go to a gathering point, maybe outside the local church, where she can get treatment, where she can be taken care of. We have to understand that our survival is in our hands, and we can't look to the state and we can't look to the system to protect us. And so that would be my closing comment. We need to close with those people in the faith-based community, whether they're Muslims, whether they're Christians, or whatever. We need to enlist them in understanding that we not only need Bible classes, we need classes on how to survive. We need classes on how to do first aid. We need classes on how to on what do we do in an emergency. We need to have our little emergency units that we could call into operation when the lights go out. So this is my final or what I wanted to say to activists in the community, that we have to organize, and we have to organize from the grassroots up, and using every one of our talents, every bit of our talents, to empower and protect our community.
Yes, sir. Well, as always, Baba Dhoruba does not disappoint. I'm just privileged to be able to have made a connection with you, Baba Dhoruba, and also, I guess you would say a colleague of mine, brother Jared Ball, who you know well. We were both taught by an incredible brother who, unfortunately, became an ancestor last August, Dr. James Turner, Africana Studies pioneer. And it's really just a blessing to know that there are elders in the community who, despite what's going on in their lives, still extend themselves to those of us who really want clarity and want to learn more of what we need to do and how we need to prepare. I you make me think that we need to also work more on establishing, for lack of a better word, apprentice systems. I don't know what we call it, but master teachers and community organizers or revolutionaries having these kind of very direct relationships with younger people.
Mm-hmm.
That when I think about you, that's what I think about. We need to have those things. They need to be more structured and taken more seriously, because the information is getting lost. It appears sometimes. You've said about 6 times in this broadcast, if you read, you gotta read. So that's saying we need that connection. And I also think that we have to have these linkages between our elder revolutionaries and the aspiring revolutionaries, so that they know what steps not to make, and so that they know what things they should be reading and what people they should watch out for. What do you think about that, Baba?
Well, that's a major function of the state. The major function of the repressive state is to separate each generation from the previous one. Is to make sure that leaders in the revolutionary movement cannot pass on their experiences to the next generation. And this is very important. This is why I've talked about, and you've known and you heard me before, I've talked about how in the wake of the George Floyd and Mike Brown murders, how thousands and thousands of young people took to the streets, and how they were completely encapsulated by the hashtag movement leaders. The hashtag movements were not genuinely mass movements. They harnessed the emotions and the energies of people who wanted to do something and led it into completely useless directions. And then when the money began to flow, when the co-optation part came in, then these so-called community activists and leaders bounced. But there were genuine people on the ground who were doing organizing work. There were genuine people trying to mobilize and do what needed to be done. But without political education, without an established means of educating activists on how the enemy works, on how what we've mistakes that we've made in the past, on how to use language, how to express ourselves to our people. How do we express ourselves to our people so that people know exactly what we're talking about and what we're saying comes from us? One of the first things we had to do in the Black Panther Party was to make sure that people understood who we were and what we were saying. That's why we established the Black Community News Service. That's why the Black Panther Party had a newspaper, so that you didn't have to go around trying to figure out what we thought. You didn't have to try to delve into some other hearsay. We said what we said, and it was in our program, it was in our newspaper. But now we have access to the mass media. Now we have the global village. This is why you see that in countries where the regimes are at threat of mass movements, they cut off the internet. They cut off the ability of the people to communicate and mobilize. Okay, so we need to take advantage of AI. We need to take advantage of these instruments that we have right now that we're talking, and systematically do master classes in educating activists and reaching out to those brothers and sisters who are on the edge, those educated, those who are uneducated, those who are matriculating through schools. We need to be able to create a political awareness and consciousness amongst these folks, so that when we do need volunteers, when we do need people to step forward, somebody could always contribute some way and somehow to what we're trying to build. Everybody can't do the same thing, but all of us can do things together. So that's my final thoughts on what you were saying.
Oh man, those of y'all who came hungry for knowledge, you got fed well today. You had a full meal. We thank you, Baba Dhoruba. I just want to say before we end, those of you who came later missed that we talked about, but Baba Dhoruba gave us a synopsis of some medical challenges he's facing and things of that nature, and we want to extend ourselves to be of a help to him, and as he mentioned, to help the people who have been helping him. So we have scrolling at the bottom two ways to do that. Through if you want to donate to Brother Dhoruba through Cash App or through PayPal, scrolling on the bottom. But also, we're going to be putting up, hopefully by tomorrow, a GoFundMe as well. So these are three ways you can. It should be an ongoing thing, because expenses come up. You may have to travel for treatment here. Somebody's a system they need some support. So we want to create a pipeline that's open, that's not finite. And we want to thank you, Baba Dhoruba. The Queen says she's going to get you that fish, brother. It's the last thing she does. Is that right, babe?
Yes.
She said she's going to get you that fish, and it's medicinal, and you're going to thank her for it. And thank you for all you've done and all you continue to do, Baba Dhoruba. Appreciate you. I'll be in touch about the GoFundMe and everything, okay?
Okay, I appreciate being on the program too. Power to the people.
Power to the people. Peace, family. Salute. Thank you for joining us.